Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you to our first episode of our new show here at Engage Church called Ask a Pastor. Now, the point of this show is really the title. It's to ask the pastor. We want to be able to answer real life questions for those who are part of Engage and who aren't a part of the Engage Church community. Because again, one of the things I notice throughout my time of pastoring is many times that, pastors can really preach about different things that sometimes have no real relevance to people's everyday life. And I know here at Engage, we really try to focus on where we try to bring the scriptures to life that really have a real intersection with the human experience. And so what we want to do in these moments is go a little bit deeper. We're going to have different pastors coming on, being a part of this, pastors here at Engage, to pastors in our city, and really pastors from around the country being a part of what we're doing. So today, man, we got Cincinnati's finest with us in the building. Pastor Derek Hayes serves as associate pastor. Pastor Derek, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be some questions feeding to us by the one and only Billy Humphrey. You won't be able to see him, though. You just hear his voice. So he's like Oz behind the curtain. So here we go. So we got some questions we're going to answer. We're going to get after them. Again, we want to encourage you guys, and you will hear more about this at the end about where you can send these questions to. But again, these are about relationship, finance, sexuality. All the questions that at times you want to ask but don't know where to go. We want to hopefully be able to try to answer these questions through the lens of Scripture, but also with our current cultural moment. So yeah, man. So we're ready to rock and roll. Let's get it done.
Question number one for you guys: are there different types of love in regards to relationship, and if so, what could they be?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the question is like, if it's like a basic, what are the different types of love? And so I'll just take it from that standpoint. There are differences of love. You've got eros, that's erotic love, that's romantic love, that's where that comes from. You've got brotherly love, that's something that the Bible talks about as well. You've got agape, you've got storge, family love. So I don't know if that's the angle that you're coming from, but in terms of relationships, absolutely there are different types of love, and all of those have different depths to them. And I think we all experience those. So.
Yeah, I think that there's, and again, that's hard, when you kind of get the question to try to figure out where they're going. But if you're just thinking about it from yes, there's different levels, I think, of relationship. As a matter of fact, today I was actually listening to something, and, you think about even in the beginning of Scripture, with the beginning of the New Testament church, one of the things that set aside that church was the fact of the love that they had as a biblical community. And that's one of the things that the Apostle Paul talked about, where they lived together, they sold goods, they sacrificed for one another. And that's why, even when you go on, that Paul talks so much later about the idea of sex and sexual purity, because he actually was talking to the church community about, hey, you're living together, you're living in this kind of in this way that's been different than culture, but hey, there's a respect for one another, man. We just don't use our freedoms, because he's talking to Jesus followers in that moment. He's also speaking to the idea of their community. So I think there's different types of love, and I think that it's really important to understand that. I think the biggest one that we see, from Jesus, that the idea of agape love. That's this love that's just it's not transactional love. It's just an absolute sacrificial love with no return on the end, or thinking you're going to get a return on the end. And I think that as a Jesus follower, I think we should, no matter what relationship you're in, friendship to marriage relationships, whatever, that you should. I think the foundation of love should be that type of agape love.
Current culture emphasizes getting rid of toxic friendships. How do we as believers maintain boundaries and still sacrifice like Jesus?
Yeah, I'm going to probably take a different angle. I've talked about this before, and I want to say it again. I think that, in our current cultural moment, a lot of times when I hear that from people, cut out toxic relationships and friendships, many times it's like, what people mean by that, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of times what I see is people, they'll say anybody that has any bit of negative to say to you, anybody challenges what you want to do. If somebody tells you, hey, I don't think that's a good idea, you can't do that. And then people, but oh man, saying you're messing up my energy, you're bringing negative energy, you're killing my vibe, and da da da. Yeah, positive vibes only. I'm like, no, that's not how you grow. You know what I mean? You grow because you should have friends. I always say you should have a keep it real friend. You should have that friend in your life who, when you talk to them, they're always challenging what you think, because friends like that make you have to really be convicted about what you're doing. And so I want to start off by saying before you start cutting out toxic relationship, make sure it's really toxic. Now again, we're not talking about abuse, we're not talking about anything like that, but we're talking about when I say not cutting friendships off, it can't be that, listen, if you got friends around you who that's all they ever tell you is what you want to hear, or, hey, you do something dumb, they may joke with you, but they're never calling you out for stuff like that. Like, you'll never grow as a human. Like, that's not part of the human experience of growth. So, but I would say onto that, though, if you do have toxic relationships that are in your life, and how should you do that? Say you're in a relationship right now and it's just not healthy. Say you're a Jesus follower in your relationship, you're in sexual sin in that relationship. Maybe it's verbally abusive, like whatever those type of things are. Whenever you're in those things, I think what has to happen is that one of the things I tell people, if those relationships are toxic and you need to cut those relationships off, you need to cut those relationships off. It's like a Band-Aid. There's no like slow like ripping that thing off. You just get rid of the relationship. And again, that sounds very harsh. Oh, well, man, maybe you're with somebody for 2 years. How do you do that? Well, what I see a lot of times is people stay for a long period of time, and they keep staying and slowly try to remove it. And at the end of the day, the results they were trying not to go, oh, I don't want to hurt this person, I don't want to do this, you end up doing it anyway. So I just say, man, like, if it's a relationship that's toxic, if it's causing you guys to not honor God, or whatever it may be, then you need to just, you need to be upfront, be honest. Again, the truth sets you free. If it's a relationship that's not healthy, the truth sets you free. Be honest about it.
Yeah. I'm gonna come at from the other angle of like, just making the assumption that the relationship is truly toxic. And I think that it's a really difficult one for Christians to make, simply because I think the idea of forgiveness, those type of ideas, the church has not done a really good job of talking about process. And so so some of that stuff just feels weird. It feels like you're being unloving. It feels like you're being unkind. But I think a lot of it, and a lot of stuff that we're probably going to talk about, is going to come back to self-awareness, right? Like, so if you're trying to be a self-aware person, you're a person who's just like, hey, I need to begin to put up boundaries and health for myself. A lot of times when you feel like it's wrong to like love yourself, I know that's the angle I came from it a lot, was I'm thinking it feels wrong to take care of my own self. And so a lot of times people stay in your life because of that. But I think it's important for everybody to know, not just the church, hey man, it's okay to put those boundaries up. And that's what happens, man. You put boundaries up, and if it's something where you have to ease away from the relationship, then do that. You put those boundaries there. If they continue to cross those boundaries, well, you just keep pushing and pushing more boundaries until if it comes to a point where you have to walk away, then that's okay. If it's for your health, you don't have to feel bad about that. A lot of it is just self-awareness and having a willingness to take care of yourself.
What is the most important advice for single people?
There's nothing wrong with you. I'll just jump in and say that. The most important advice is you're not sick. You know what I mean? Like, literally though, it's one of those things where I think even sometimes I find myself, whether I'm preaching or something like that, it's almost like I'm putting marriage on a pedestal. And man, be the first to just say, man, apologize for that kind of stuff. We apologize for that kind of stuff that make you feel like somehow you're less than in your singleness, and you're not. I mean, I know everybody's gonna say, well, Jesus, he was single too, and you point to that, and it is true. But there's literally nothing wrong with you. And I think that's very important to know. You can be whole without an actual romantic relationship or marriage. You can actually be whole. That's a very important thing to know for yourself.
Yeah, and I would say, if I give any bit of advice on being single, it's that idea. I mean, I love what you said. I mean, definitely there's nothing wrong with you at all. I also would say, like, the reality is be in the moment. And that's really important when you're in your single season, right? The Bible talks a lot about seasons. So many times we're obsessed with getting to a finish line instead of understanding a season. When you're in a season, for example, when you're in winter, you're in the beginning of a winter season, you're not expecting, right now as we're filming this in Tallahassee, it's like, like literally I thought I saw Satan when I walked in here. It was so hot. It's like, we don't expect in winter for it to be like, oh, man, it's going to be a heat index of 112. You don't expect that when that happens, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, so when it comes to your season, instead of trying, let me just get to the end of the season, it's like, man, embracing the season that you're in. Because the reason why that's so important, because if you embrace the season that you're in, when it's that time, if that, and again, be careful, if it's that time, because there's no promise that God's saying you're going to have a spouse. But if it's that time, you will have what you need to prepare to go into that next season of life. And I think so many people who we end up having to work through, do counseling with, they didn't embrace their single season to grow in the self-control, to grow and learning how to have friendships. You know what I mean? A lot of times, man, I could say this being married. I know same thing probably with you, Derek, is that, one of the greatest things I can say is like my wife really is like my best friend. Like, I mean, like we really have a great friendship. And so I think that, man, if you don't learn how to build healthy friendships, then that's going to affect you. If you don't learn how to be okay, like you said, be okay with who you are, you're going to then go into a relationship wanting your spouse to be that. And then that ends up being toxic and hurting. And so I would encourage you, man, be in the moment, be present with the season that you're in and learn. And honestly, like, enjoy it. Because I could tell you right now, man, again, love being married, love having kids. But I can also tell you too, man, it's like, I can't even imagine like some level of production. I am limited, and that's okay. I am limited with the level of production I can do because I'm married and I have children. That's not like I don't see it as a ball and chain or whatever. That's just real. That's why, you see what Paul, one of the things that was very effective, man, because, man, from all intents what we know, Paul was not married. And so, man, he was able to kind of get up and go these places. And he was able to make radical choices because at the end of the day, he wasn't like, man, when Paul was like, man, to live as Christ, to die as gain. I need to go to Rome knowing it's going to be death. Paul wasn't, he had his family, but it wasn't like, man, he had a wife and kids at home with the fact of him dying. There's a whole different ballgame. So, I mean, your singleness, listen, that's like the greatest level of production. It's one of the greatest level of production you can have in life. I tell people, go be productive. Go try things, travel, like work your butt off. Like, I mean, do that in your singleness, man. Don't sit there and just, so.
Because I think the added bonus, if you have a desire to get married, want to do that, the added bonus to living life that way as a single person is you actually have something to bring to the table with the other person. You actually have things that you can actually invite them into, which is what you're supposed to do when you're dating and all this kind of stuff. If not, then if you spend all your time pining and wishing that you are wishing your singleness away, then you might not have as much value to add to the relationship when it's that time. So it's awesome.
Says, I always have a wall up when it comes to forming new relationships. How can I let my wall down and let others get to know the real me?
I would start by saying is that you have to I think whoever, when asked this question, I think you got to do a lot of deep dive discovery into why you have the wall up. And you have to go I always tell people you have to go 3 to 4 levels down. You got to be asking, if you can ask yourself why, like at least 3 to 5 times, you can start to discover. So what I mean by that is like, man, when you say, man, why do I have a wall up? Your first initial thing is not the real reason. It's because my family, I was, as a kid, my father never showed up to anything. Okay, man, that's a real thing. But then you say, so, well, why did that bother me? Because then you go down to the next level. Then you say, well, why did that bother me? And then when you start getting to it, you start realizing, oh man, maybe it's at the core of it, man, it's an identity thing, because you're like, man, you didn't feel like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy enough for him to even be willing to sacrifice and do that. And so now that makes you skeptical of any like male relationship, or on the other side of it, it makes you skeptical because maybe your mom was super controlling. And so now you have a wall up with anybody. No. Anytime you feel anything that seems like control from a female, you stiff arm. So I think the person, how you do that, you got to do the hard work of finding out why. And digging into that. Start to ask you, here's another real practical, when all of a sudden you start to feel that wall come up when somebody said, because a lot of times the wall doesn't just, it comes up because something is said to you. Something in that conversation, you say, oh, I put a wall up with a friend. Well, when they say something or they do something, you need to ask yourself, man, why did that make me feel that way? Because a lot of times where we can realize some of the stuff we think it was meant this way, it was never meant that way. We just interpret it that way because of our own brokenness. I always tell people a lot of the stuff, walls I've put up, when I initially stiff arm somebody, a lot of it is because of my own brokenness. It's not the person. A lot of it is just my own sets of issues. So I would say start with why. See if you can ask 3 to 5 times why I feel this way. But then also in the moment when you feel the wall come up, what triggered that? And try to get to that. Because when you start doing that, you can begin unarming those things, disarming those things, which again will allow you to dive into deeper relationships.
Yeah, definitely. I can echo that and say every time that I've put a wall up in my life, it's been to protect me. And so, I heard a great quote one time that said, hey, if there's a fence up, before you tear down the fence, make sure you know why that fence is there in the first place. Somebody built that for a reason. And so there are reasons in my life, reason in his life that the fence is there. And so I think one of the things to remember, particularly, for people who are Jesus followers, is when that kind of stuff happens, it is at the core selfish, and you are trying to protect yourself. But it is a selfish way to go about relationships, and that's hard and that's difficult, and it's okay to recognize that you're there. But in terms of just practicality now, like, okay, now that I do that, well, how do I begin to take those walls down? First, man, like, take your time. Like, don't go out and say, man, I'm just gonna choose 15 friends. Man, start small, and I hope that maybe one of the things that I think about a lot is when you're a kid, friendships come easy. No, like now when you think about it, if I ask you the question right now, hey, as a person out of college, how do you make a friend? Like, it's like crickets. Nobody knows. Like, who's thinking about that? Who's teaching? How do I even just make a friend as an adult? That's very, very difficult. And so I think some of the ways is like, hey man, like, find somebody that you have something in common with, right? You got something in common with, you start hanging out with them. But the key thing is, like, you got to start sharing who you are. And as they reciprocate that, as they begin to do the same thing, and you're okay with that, and their differences, they're okay with your differences, man, those things have a tendency to grow. So, man, take your time, learn how to take care of yourself, learn how to be a good friend, but don't just thinking it's just like all going to come crumbling down at once. There's a reason why you built the wall in the first place.
Yeah. Last question for you guys. This is in reference to dating. It says, how do you know when it's time to move forward in marriage? And what are the signs that you should end the relationship?
I would say that, how do you know? I think that the first thing is this: have people in your life. That's the biggest thing. I don't care, no matter where you find yourself. I mean, again, in any relationship. Now, some people probably watch this, they may not be in the faith community. But everybody should have people in your life who they should be able to look at you and say, hey, do you think I'm ready? Hey, do you think we're ready? I think in anything in life, we have coaching, right? We have people who help us. I mean, I believe outside of our faith, marriage is the second most important decision you'll ever make, outside of like your faith, when you make a decision. And so many times we spend more time, we have more on like on our bodies working out, having coaching there than we do on the second most important decision that we do. I realize in faith, walk with Jesus, in our marriage, so many times we isolate ourselves, but we're quick to say, man, I need a coach, a life coach, I need a business coach, I need a fitness coach, I need a skills coach. I mean, like, everybody got coaching, but the two most important things in our life, we want to be solo. So I tell you first, like, my simple advice is this: how do you know? Get an older couple or somebody like who you respect. When I say older, that doesn't mean age. They could be, 6 months ahead of you, 8 months ahead of you, but somebody you respect, but somebody who can look at you and say, man, I think you guys are, hey, here's why. They can ask you some tough questions because, they're going to have a better view from the outside, than you are. So that would be mine. I mean, I could give you a bunch of other stuff, but I would say for sure the next thing is get someone in your life who can speak to that.
Yeah. I mean, dating is one of those things, again, we probably made way too weird a little bit. And I think a lot of that comes from there's a whole bunch of anxiety when you think about if you've been in a dating relationship or you're getting out of one or whatever. Think about the anxiety that it causes. And I think some of that is because you go into the relationship already thinking about marriage. Is this the one?
Well, and I want to stop, but I want to say, especially in the Christian context too, yes. Right? Because it's like we always joke about this, like, the only one thing, like, somebody stares at somebody for 5 minutes in a Christian context, like, oh, that may be my spouse. You're like, yo, fam, like, stop being, it's so weird. I didn't mean to joke, but I wanted to say that because I think it's sometimes so weird, like in a church culture, where it's like, yo, like, before you were saved, like, you never would have done that. Now you go to the absolute opposite extreme, like, no, there's a balance, man. Like, listen, like, not every person you see. And here's what, and I'm going to be honest with you. Here's what it does. I remember this. Before I was a Christian, any girl I would see I thought was attractive, it was this: how can I figure a way to sleep with her? That was that. Now, here's how it transitions. You become a Christian, any person you see who you think is attractive, instead of, okay, you've now put the boundary, I ain't going to have sex with them, but man, how can I get married? How can you're like, it's the same thing of not like, instead of trusting. So I just want to be super clear on that. Sometimes we have made it weird because we go into it like, man, let me get to know this. No, this got to be the one. I'm like, dude, like, relax. Like, it's okay. Anyway, but keep going. Sorry.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what we've been doing. So it's one of those things where you are trying to, again, come back to knowing yourself and getting when you're getting to know this person the whole time. It's one of those like, hey, are you being honest with where you are. A lot of times we enter in and we have these rose-colored glasses, and we don't actually get to see the other person for who they really are. And then on the other foot, you're trying everything you can do to please the other person, and so they think that you have likes and dislikes that are similar to them, when really you're just trying to impress them so that they don't go anywhere. And the whole time, what you're actually doing is you're just not trusting God the whole time. Right. But as you're honest and you keep walking forward in the relationship, one of the key things that I think is a practical to what he was saying is premarital counseling. Like, please do it. If you want to know, hey, like, don't, what if you did premarital before or right next to engagement? What would that look like, to go into it with an outside party to say, hey, I'm going to do exactly what he was saying. I'm going to get an outside party to walk me through. What does this look like? Who is this? Am I really seeing this other person? Or do we really have similar interests? And then am I willing to put up with the other person's crazy? I'm truly convinced that that's what we do when we get married. We're saying your level of crazy is just about the one I can handle, and my level of crazy is the one that you can handle. And it goes from there. There's no really, it's not like a magical formula to it. It's just, it takes a whole lot of honesty, which, that's the thing that's creating the intimacy that's drawing you two together. So
and I know one of the last parts of the question was that, man, how do you know when to cut it off? Like, how do you know when there's a relationship to cut off? I think that, again, if you're a Jesus follower, I think that if you're in a relationship that is constantly, you guys are both in a constant place of being in sin, and whether that again, a lot of times we think it's only like sexual sin. No, but like, you're in a place of where, man, like, I think where it's causing you to, verbally be out of character, if it's causing you to, if it's causing you emotionally to be all over the place, if it's causing you, like, if it's taking you away from growing in your faith, if it's taking you away from your church community, stuff like that, is like, man, you need to really like look at those, you need to look at those things. But there are moments where you're like, you know what, man, like, everything's going good, but like, we just don't seem to kind of click. Like, that's okay. I think the best advice I ever heard was that, man, if you, in a dating relationship, if you're a Jesus follower, that they said that, man, at the end of the day, like, if you were later to see that person you were with their spouse, you could look that person's eye with like respect and say, man, like, I respected and I honored her. You know what I'm saying? And I think that in the right kind of way, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes people get real weird with that in Christianity. We're like, oh, well, if you kiss her, you didn't honor her. You're like, no, that's stupid. Like, no. Like, honor her is like, man, like, you kept proper boundaries, biblical boundaries. Your heart was in the right place, man. You guarded that person. When you were separated, you broke up, man, you didn't go around trashing that person's name. I mean, you did it in an honorable way. And the thing about it, I love these questions. I want to begin to kind of like make this conversation, because I think that we have made, now, again, like you said, we had the whole thing of where I kissed dating goodbye, right? And we had that, and now again, and Joshua Harris, as we're recording this, this kind of divorced, went away from, kind of walked away from faith. And I don't say that in any type of critical way toward him, but we had that hyper world, and now we're having a hyper world where Christian people just do whatever they want to do. And it's like, oh, well, there's no boundaries. Like, no, there's always a middle and a tension. And so I think if we can make it not weird, if we can make people learn how to have conversation, learn how to build friendships and be healthy, if we can learn, like, not to make, like you said earlier, I thought it was a great point, not to make, as pastors, us not to make marriage like, you got to do this is the end goal, like, to do that. But also young people, here's the other thing too, being secure in this. If you're in a church with like people who are married, we're going to talk about marriage. Sure. And it's not going to be like, oh, well, that church always talks about marriage. No, like, you're going to be in a church. It's like, you know what? You like, when I talk to young people about, like, sexual sin and not going to get drunk, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're not older people in church, like, oh man, stupid church is all they talk about. Like, no, like, it's not always about you. That's why I tell people, when you're in a church community, it ain't always about you, and so you got to just be able to be secure enough and stuff like that. So hopefully these are things that, can help. All right, guys. Well, hey, Pastor Derek, thank you so much for being here with us. Hey, guys, here's what we want you to do. We want you to send your questions in to us, media@Engage Tallahassee. We want you to submit these questions, guys, because, again, we want to be able to answer them. So whatever questions you have, please submit them. And, again, we're going to choose the best ones to be able to answer them. So, again, we want these questions, and the ones that we can't get to, we're going to save those to answer them on another episode. But our next episode, we're actually going to talk about race and our current cultural moment. So stay tuned to that. And, hey, we look forward to being with you again soon.